when you mention the name Dean Martin to them, they say wine, women, and song. Is that an accurate description of your preferences?
Women and song. I'm not too crazy about wine.
Dean Martin was the embodiment of cool, effortless charm, smooth voice, and a stage presence that made millions swoon.
Wine, women, and song. I mean, what else is there to say about me? I love to sing, and I love women. Oh, I drink. I'm not an alcoholic or anything like that. That's the way they wanted me, and I couldn't change if I wanted to.
But beneath the polished surface of the Rat Pack icon was a story riddled with heartbreak, loss, and secrets few ever saw. How did the man known for laughter and ease carry the weight of unimaginable personal grief? Behind the glitz and the whiskey glass, Dean's life was marked by tragedy, including the devastating losses that fractured his family and shaped his final years. What really happened to Dean and the woman who stood beside him through decades of both fame and sorrow? Their ending was far from the Hollywood fairy tale. The hidden pain behind the smile. Dean Martin was famous for his laid-back charm and effortless cool, but beneath that easygoing image was a man carrying a heavy, hidden burden. To the world, he was the king of smooth wit and relaxed confidence, always with a drink in hand and a joke ready. Yet those closest to him saw a different side, quiet, reserved, and at times deeply troubled. His public persona was a carefully crafted act that masked emotional pain few ever suspected. This tension between what fans saw and what he felt inside would shape much of his life in ways the spotlight never revealed. Despite his success in music, film, and television, Dean often retreated from social situations, preferring silence over small talk at parties and events. He was misunderstood as aloof or stuck up, but it stemmed more from shyness and discomfort than arrogance. Dean himself admitted in one rare interview that he never quite mastered the art of casual conversation because he struggled with English early in life. That inability to connect easily left him feeling isolated, even surrounded by crowds of fans. The loneliness undercut the carefree image everyone expected. Friends and colleagues noticed how Dean's ease on stage didn't carry over into his personal life. Behind closed doors, he was a man wrestling with loss and regret. The joke-telling, whiskey-raising Martin was a mask that hid a quieter sorrow. Over the years, those sorrows piled up, losses and heartbreaks that slowly chipped away at the man behind the smile. Observers who spent time with him in his final years described a fading light, a spark that once burned bright, now dimmed by grief. It was as if he carried a secret wound no laughter could heal. This hidden pain was not new. It was woven into the fabric of his life from the beginning. His triumphs on stage and screen never erased the quiet battles he fought away from the cameras. The mask he wore to entertain the world grew heavier with each tragedy that struck. And while Dean kept performing, the man behind the music was often retreating inward. Understanding these struggles is key to grasping the full story of Dean Martin's life and the heartbreaking end that awaited him. Yet this sorrow was balanced by resilience and an enduring love for his craft. He worked hard to maintain his public image and provide joy to millions. But personal grief struck hard and cast long shadows, especially as his family life became complicated and losses mounted. That contrast between fame and private misery adds a layer of poignancy to his story. It reminds us that even the coolest stars can bear the heaviest burdens, unseen by the shining spotlight. As the years passed, the gap between who Dean was on stage and who he was in life only widened. The comedy and charm he displayed became a shield from the realities he preferred not to face publicly. And though his laughter was genuine at times, it often disguised a heart bruised by loss. The deeper we look, the clearer it becomes that the smiles he gave the world were both a gift and a shield. What led to this divide will become clearer as we trace his past and the paths that brought him here. That story begins in a small Ohio town, far from the glamorous life of Las Vegas and Hollywood. Dean's origins offer a glimpse into the man behind the myth, the boy who became a legend, but never quite escaped the hardships of his early days. Roots and early hardships. Dean Martin was born Dino Paul Crocetti on June 7, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio, a small industrial town on the banks of the Ohio River. His parents were Italian immigrants, his father was a barber, and his mother was Ohio-born to Italian parents, so the family was deeply connected to their heritage. At home, only Italian was spoken, and young Dino didn't learn English until he was 5 years old. This late start created challenges that would follow him throughout his early years in school. Because of his limited English skills, Dino faced bullying and isolation from classmates. He often felt like an outsider, unable to communicate easily or fit in. He later confessed that school was difficult for him, in part because of language barriers and cultural differences. His tough early experiences shaped a sense of difference that never quite left him. While he claimed jokingly that he was too smart for school, these challenges revealed the reality of a boy struggling to find his place. Dino had given up on school when he reached the 10th grade, and he concluded that formal education was not his thing. He made that decision, which marked a turn in his life, leading him to take different jobs and live a hard life just to be able to support himself. He attempted to become a barber like his father, but eventually ended up in a succession of hard jobs: attendant at a gas station, delivering milk, and working at a pharmacy. He didn't like any of these jobs, and he kept searching for a way out of the hard life that he was living. During this period, there was one strange episode that included bare-knuckle boxing. Under the name Kid Crochet, Dino took part in boxing matches, even though he had a lot of injuries, including a broken nose and crushed knuckles. He did not win often, but the toughening and the exposure to the tougher side of life were his rewards for being. His boxing was desperate and gritty, a long way from the glamorous image he would later cultivate. After relocating to New York City, Dino shared a place with a wannabe entertainer called Sonny King. They were financially strained, and, to survive, they organized bare-knuckle fights in their little apartment. These clandestine fights were an addition to Dino's early struggles, but also proved his will to live and to continue looking for a way out. It was evident even then that he had what it takes, although the future he dreamed of was far from the pugilistic life he was living. A new chance did not appear until he started to perform in illegal places such as smoke-filled rooms of clubs and casinos. His gorgeous and warm voice got the attention of the local band leader, Ernie McKay, and Dino was invited to be a part of the band. This was the turning point of his changeover from a tough street fighter to a star. The name change to Dean Martin was a step to the plan of building a new identity that would very soon be known all over the world. From these roots, Dean's journey to stardom was unpredictable, but ultimately irresistible, driven by talent and a relentless desire to rise above. His early hardships were the soil from which his legendary persona would grow, even as they planted seeds of the personal turmoil to come. Rise to stardom and public image. Dean Martin's ascent from struggling nightclub singer to Hollywood icon was marked as much by calculated image building as by natural talent. Early in his career, he realized that singing alone wasn't enough. He needed a persona that people would remember. Inspired by the performer Phil Harris, who cultivated the image of a hard-drinking, woman-chasing showman, Dean crafted his own smooth, relaxed, drunken style. Holding a cocktail on stage and appearing effortlessly cool became his trademark, a carefully rehearsed act that fans adored. This image was not genuine drunkenness, but pure showmanship. Dean rarely drank as much as he pretended, sometimes using apple juice in his glass instead of whiskey. His slurred speech and tipsy demeanor were part of the performance, an amusing facade that masked a sharp professional mind. Those who worked closely with him confirmed the act, praising his skill in making it look natural without losing control. The King of Cool was as much a character as a person. By the early 1940s, Dean was performing full-time, first in Ohio and then in New York. He changed his stage name from Dino Martini to Dean Martin, following advice from his manager, who believed a simple, memorable name would stick better. The shift marked the start of a new phase, as he expanded from nightclub singing to radio, film, and eventually television. His charisma and relaxed style won millions of fans, catapulting him to national stardom. Dean's breakthrough came with his partnership with comedian Jerry Lewis. Together, they formed a duo that combined Dean's singing and suave presence with Jerry's slapstick humor and wild energy. Their early shows struggled, but a last-minute improvisation at the 500 Club turned the act into an instant hit. Their chemistry was electric, and they quickly became one of the most popular comedy duos in America throughout the late 1940s and early 1950s. Despite their success, cracks soon appeared in the partnership. Dean grew tired of being the straight man, who simply sang and played along while Jerry got most of the laughs. Reports suggest Dean felt sidelined and underappreciated, pushing him to invest less passion into the act. Their split in 1956 ended a profitable decade, but allowed Dean to focus fully on his solo career, where he soon thrived as a leading singer and actor. After breaking away, Dean became a central figure in the Rat Pack, performing alongside Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and others in Las Vegas. Though the group was known for wild parties and rough edges, Dean was more reserved than most, often leaving early and avoiding excess. His friendship with Sinatra was deep but complex, rooted in mutual respect rather than constant companionship. Dean carved out his own version of cool, quiet, understated, but no less commanding. Dean's image on television further solidified his place in American entertainment history. The Dean Martin Show, which ran from 1965 to 1974, presented him as relaxed, humorous, and effortlessly charming. He famously refused to rehearse and often watched performances from backstage. Yet, when it was his turn, he captivated millions with his smooth voice and playful wit. The show's massive success cemented his reputation as a beloved entertainer. The forces shaping Dean Martin's life, the crafted image, the rise to stardom, and the shadows beneath the spotlight, all come together in the next chapter, where personal relationships and tragedy start to rewrite his story. Marriage, family, and personal complexities. Dean Martin's personal life was as complex as his public image was smooth. In 1941, he married his first love, Elizabeth Ann Betty MacDonald, and together they started building a large family. Betty supported Dean during the early years of his demanding career, and they had 4 children, Craig, Claudia, Gail, and Diana. While their marriage began with promise, the strains of Dean's rising fame and changing life eventually led to their divorce in 1949. Despite the split, Dean won custody of all 4 children, and his connection to them remained strong. Only a week after the divorce from Betty was finalized, Dean married again, this time to Jean Beager, a former model and Orange Blossom queen. Jean entered Dean's life in the backdrop of rapid career success, and became a steadfast partner for the next 24 years. Together, they expanded their family with 3 children of their own: Dean, Paul Jr., Richie, and Gina. Jean embraced her role as a stepmother to Dean's older children, creating a blended household that was famously large and lively. Dean often joked about his 7 kids, capturing both affection and the chaos behind the scenes. Despite projecting a glamorous image through their marriage, with Dean being a top singer, actor, and Rat Pack member, the couple's relationship was quite tumultuous. In late 1969, their differences started to become apparent and finally led to a public separation. The marriage was legally dissolved in 1972, with Dean ironically commenting that it was gentlemanly of him to allow his wife to file, although he admitted he was no gentleman. Even though they were no longer legally married, Dean and Jean still formed a strong bond and remained close, especially in the following years, as they went through sharing grief and memories that would unexpectedly draw them back together. Dean's third marriage came along rather quickly in 1973 when he tied the knot with Catherine Sandy Horn, a receptionist at a Beverly Hills beauty salon. It was a union initiated by a friend and a wedding attended by celebrities like Frank Sinatra and others who were more like a family, and was thus a very public union. The marriage was short-lived, however, as it only lasted 3 years before it ended in divorce in 1976. Even though Dean and Catherine did not have any kids, he adopted her daughter, Sasha, and brought her up just like his own. This last marriage not only cut off Dean's legal bond to the women in his life, but also marked the end of his vows, while the family responsibilities remained. The image of a happy family man and a carefree entertainer overshadowed Dean's personal life, which was full of complex emotions and difficult choices. He skillfully navigated through the challenges of being a celebrity, a father to 7 kids, and a man married 3 times over. To make things more complicated, allegations surfaced years later claiming that he had an affair with John during his second marriage, which was ironic as John had a hard time coping with the situation. The personal dynamics revealed the high price of fame and the scratches that came with even the most perfect lives. Dean's family life was very full, but not always peaceful, so moments of joy were followed by tensions. His relationships showed a man who was very loving, but at the same time struggled with his own defects and errors. The truth behind the King of Cool's persona was dirtier and more brittle than the fans thought. His kids and wives all contributed to a story that was bigger than just the triumphs of Hollywood. It was about love, loss, and human weakness. This devastating event became a turning point, reshaping Dean's relationships and the person he showed the world, revealing that even the brightest stars can be eclipsed by grief. The tragic loss of Dean Paul Martin Jr. In 1987, Dean Martin endured the most shattering tragedy of his life when his son, Dean Paul Martin Jr., died in a military jet crash. At just 35 years old, Dean Paul Jr. was a rising star in his own right, an athlete, musician, and pilot, carving out a path separate from his famous father. The sudden loss devastated Dean Martin, piercing the heart of a man already no stranger to hardship. The impact was immediate and profound, casting a long shadow over the final years of his life. This tragedy not only broke Dean's spirit, but also strained one of his closest adult friendships with Frank Sinatra. Previously inseparable, the weight of grief pulled the two apart, with Dean even walking out on a tour they were sharing. Friends observed a man who withdrew from the world and the stage, his once effortless charm replaced by deep sorrow. The loss was more than personal. It fractured the very core of Dean's identity as a father and performer. Following the crash, Dean retreated from much of the public eye, struggling to find his footing amid unbearable grief. People close to him noticed a sharp change, a fading desire to perform and a retreat into quiet. The light-hearted, witty persona that had carried him through decades now seemed diminished, as if a vital part of him had died along with his son. The tragedy marked the beginning of a slow unraveling that no amount of fame or fortune could repair. Dean's broken heart was evident to those who knew him best. Jerry Lewis famously remarked that after losing his son, that was the end of him. No longer was Dean the lively entertainer. The pain took over, and the mask slipped away. His drinking increased, not as a mere act on stage, but as a genuine escape. His friends and family saw a man who had lost not only a child, but a piece of himself, struggling to survive without the joy that once animated him. Despite the overwhelming sadness, Dean and Sinatra eventually reconciled, mending their fractured friendship before Dean's death. Sinatra's tribute after Dean passed was heartfelt and revealing. He called Dean "like the air I breathe," emphasizing the deep brotherhood that endured beyond trials. Their bond, forged in the fires of shared triumph and loss, echoed the complexities beneath celebrity friendships, marked by loyalty even when challenged by grief. The death of Dean Paul Jr. also reconnected Dean Martin with his second wife, Jean, who stood by him as he navigated this dark time. Together, they found comfort in their shared loss and history, rekindling a relationship rooted in more than just fame or public perception. Their renewed closeness demonstrated how tragedy can sometimes forge unexpected bonds, uniting people in ways life had previously pulled apart. In this profound sorrow, Dean's story would continue to unfold, shaped by the love and grief that marked the final chapters of his life. The bonds of family and memory held strong, even when everything else seemed to slip away. Reconnection and final years with Jean Martin. After the devastating loss of their son, Dean Paul Martin Jr., Dean and his second wife, Jean, found their way back to each other. Though they had been divorced for more than a decade, the profound shared grief drew them together once again. Their renewed bond wasn't about rekindling a romance in the traditional sense, but about companionship and mutual support in a time of unbearable pain. Jean stood faithfully by Dean during his darkest days, providing quiet strength when he needed it most. The history of Dean and Jean was not straightforward. The marriage lasted for 24 years, and these years had created very strong connections that could not be easily untied even by divorce. The family they had together was large and noisy, and when they separated, they started living individual lives. But the love and respect that were the foundation of their relationship remained unchanged. Now, because of the tragedy, these memories and common roots made it possible for them to help each other. They were together a lot, and they would often talk about their past, their children, and the loss that had changed their lives forever. Jean, during this time, was a constant source of support, both emotionally and practically. Friends and family reports characterized her as a wife who was devoted, attentive, and kind, thus providing Dean with a feeling of normalcy in the middle of the inferno caused by grief. Although the marriage was legally over, the tie between them became deeper in an unplanned way, which was a demonstration that love could change its form and be accepted at different levels beyond the boundaries of the law. This silent intimacy was the opposite of Dean's public face. It was a vulnerable and very human side which he had rarely shown even to his fans. From the start of Dean's illness to the end, Jean was present all the time, thus proving her loyalty for a lifetime as he struggled against the darkness of ill health and spirit. Jean's involvement was not merely emotional. It was a partnership that had been created through years of understanding and living together. Little was said about past mistakes or separations. Rather, the couple concentrated on present difficulties and the solace they derived from each other's simple company. Their bond during these years transformed into a witness of unbreakable ties that live on even after separation by death. It was a shared story of divorce and pain that marked their lives. But the last chapter together was nonetheless a quietly touching one. Their friends remarked how these moments together seemed to be nothing but real and very sincere, like a rediscovered deep mutual respect. Dean was once again often regarded as the one who brought easy charm and humor. He now looked more vulnerable, slowly leaning on Jean's unwavering nature. On the contrary, Jean took the mantle of this task in a quiet manner, the way a gentle person met the end of her life with no fuss, through the silence of Dean's Vie pour Neuve. This disconnection and subsequent reconnection depicted a deeper character of Dean Martin, not merely as a star or performer, but as a person who was highly loyal and capable of feeling deep sadness. It showed that even in the case of personal controversies and a difficult family life, some human relationships still last. Their friendship during these times lessened the harsh effects of Dean's decline and made his story one of tenderness amid sorrow. As Dean's health began to fail, the quiet strength of Jean's companionship contrasted with the fading lights of fame, setting the stage for the inevitable march toward his final goodbye. Decline, illness, and facing mortality. Dean Martin's lifelong battle with health issues finally caught up with him in the early 1990s. A heavy smoker for most of his life, Dean was diagnosed with lung cancer at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. This diagnosis marked the beginning of a rapid decline in his health, a stark reminder that no amount of fame or charm could shield him from mortality. Despite surgeons offering potentially life-extending operations, Dean chose to forego treatment, preferring to spend his remaining time away from hospitals and the public eye. By 1993, it was clear Dean's health was deteriorating. He retreated from performing and public appearances, stepping back from the stage that had defined much of his life. Friends and family observed a man growing quieter, less energetic, and more withdrawn. The easy smile and effortless charisma began to fade, replaced by a fragile figure confronting the realities of age and illness. Dean spent his final years largely in his Beverly Hills home, surrounded by family and Jean Martin. He shunned the spotlight, opting instead for privacy as he faced the slow progression of emphysema and respiratory failure. This retreat was both a physical necessity and an emotional response, as Dean seemed to reconcile himself with the end of an era, not just his career, but his life itself. Dealing with the powerful aura of the man who once dominated the performing arts was a mighty struggle for the public during that time. The separation between his past glamour and present decrepitude was very large. Still, the guests who came to see him reported the periods of clearness and cohabitation, the very small representations of the humor and generosity that could still be found in him, though the physical challenges were mounting. The final chapter of Dean was an episode of mixing dignity and quietness, giving up. On the 25th of December, 1995, Dean Martin, 78 years old, passed away. The reason was acute respiratory failure, and emphysema had complicated it, making it a tragic but not an unexpected ending for a smoke lover whose lifestyle had been that way for a long time. Martin's death not only sent ripples through the world of entertainment, but also through the hearts of the millions of fans who had been won over by his voice, presence, and character over the years. Dean had been synonymous with Las Vegas. He had made it even more famous with his shows and the Rat Pack's company, so the city lowered the lights of its renowned strip in his tribute. The act was symbolic and on the part of the city acknowledging the passing of a major player in its golden age of entertainment. Everywhere across the nation, mass praises came, recognizing Dean Martin not merely as a star, but more importantly, as a beloved universal symbol of the era whose influence transcended music and movies. Dean was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, located in Los Angeles. His unpretentious tombstone has the quote of his most popular song, "Everybody loves somebody sometime," as its epitaph, which is both humorous and very appropriate, that it has paid tribute to his career and the love he spread. The message was simple, but the man behind it was complex. His laughter, his suffering, and his continuous legacy were the things he left behind. As the curtain closed on Dean Martin's life, those who loved him held on to the memories he crafted, songs, laughter, and moments of genuine connection that outlasted even the gloomiest days. Dean Martin's final years and legacy. After Dean Martin's death in 1995, Dean Martin lived her remaining years with quiet dignity. Though their marriage had ended decades earlier, the bond formed through years of love, family, and shared loss never fully disappeared. Dean chose a private life in Beverly Hills and never remarried, carrying forward the memories of the world they had built together. She battled cancer in her later years and passed away in 2016 at 89. Her death closed a chapter long intertwined with one of Hollywood's most beloved figures. Dean was remembered not only as Dean's former wife, but as a steady, grounding presence throughout the highs and lows of his turbulent life. The Martins were parents to 7 kids, thus making a mixed family which stayed closely connected even after the divorce. Although Dean and Dean had their differences, their bond was the children's lifeblood, particularly following the heartbreaking death of their son Dean Paul Jr. Dean had a very large impact on Dean. She was his support during the highs of his career and his source of comfort during the lows of personal loss. After their son's death, she was a rare witness to Dean's support in overcoming the overwhelming sadness. Dean and Dean, despite being apart, maintained their connection via family and a shared past. When Dean's health deteriorated, Dean's compassion and strength were the major and revealing directors of the quiet partnership behind his public charm. The death of their son Richie in 2016, a few months before Dean, was another tragedy that came to them. Her life was a mix of happiness and sorrow, a reflection of a love that was strong enough to even surpass the marriage bond. Dean's memory is still very much a part of the story of Dean. The saga of love, loss, and indestructible ties continues. In remembering Dean Martin, we acknowledge the woman who stood beside a legend, bearing the weight of joy and tragedy alike. Her final years, like her life with Dean, were shaped by love's complexities and the strength to carry on. Dean Martin's life was a blend of dazzling success and profound sorrow, with personal losses shaping the man behind the cool image. His story reminds us that behind every legend is a deeply human journey, marked by love, heartbreak, and resilience. If you found this story moving, please like and subscribe for more revealing tales from Hollywood's fascinating history. Thanks for watching. For